When my asthmatic mom couldn't breathe at the neighborhood barbecue, our power-hungry HOA president stole her inhaler as punishment for breaking her petty rules. How was she supposed to know that my sweet, struggling mother was actually an undercover FBI agent investigating a corrupt organization? The red and blue lights glowed through our curtains as I watched the ambulance carry Mom away, all because Eleanor Hoffman couldn't mind her own business about our garden gnome. I stood in our driveway, shaking, partly from rage, partly from fear. It hadn't always been this way. Just 10 hours earlier, everything was normal. I remember the moment Eleanor first targeted us. We had just finished unpacking boxes in our new home in Pinecrest Gardens when a sharp knock interrupted our pizza dinner. There she stood, spotless in her white pantsuit, a black notebook clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Eleanor said without smiling. "Your mailbox is non-regulation, 2 shades darker than permitted. Please fix it by Friday." Mom warmly invited her in for pizza, but Eleanor turned up her nose. "I prefer to keep our interactions professional. I'm the HOA president. All applicable regulations can be found in your welcome packet." There were many, so many. That was 3 months ago. Since then, Eleanor had been relentless. She wrote us up for trash cans visible from the street, for Christmas lights left up after January 2nd, for a bird feeder that allegedly attracted pests, for Mom's rose bushes growing just half an inch too tall, and even for a non-existing oil leak from my car. Mom, a kind woman who taught kindergarten for 30 years before retiring last spring, tried to make peace. She baked cookies for Eleanor, invited her over for tea, even offered to help with community projects. But Eleanor responded by turning up the pressure with more and more inspections. What really seemed to offend Eleanor was Raymond, the garden gnome Dad gave Mom for their anniversary, just before his heart attack. He sat there, a small, happy figurine with a fishing rod in hand, a symbol of happiness and memories. "It cheapens the aesthetic of Pinecrest Gardens," Eleanor said during her 4th visit in 2 weeks. "The rules allow for tasteful lawn ornaments," Mom replied quietly, showing Eleanor the applicable page in the HOA handbook. "Raymond stays." I noticed Mom's hand tremble as she turned page. The stress was wearing her down. Her asthma, normally under control, was growing much worse since Dad's death. Then came the annual Pinecrest Garden barbecue. Eleanor called a special meeting about community standards beforehand. When we arrived at the clubhouse, I felt the silence grow heavy. Too many people avoided our gaze or turned away in discomfort. "Glad you could join us." Eleanor's voice cut through the room as we found seats. I was just discussing property values and how certain residents seemed determined to undermine them. She clicked to a PowerPoint slide, a picture of our home with Raymond's circle marked in red. This is exactly the kind of tackiness that drives away prospective buyers. Mom stood up. "Eleanor, this isn't appropriate for a community event. The bylaws clearly state." "The bylaws state I maintain community standards." Eleanor interrupted, "And your attitude has been documented repeatedly." Some neighbors nodded quietly in agreement with Mom. "That gnome was a gift from my late husband." Mom's voice faltered, and I could hear her starting to wheeze, the first sign of another attack. "Your personal attachments aren't our concern." Eleanor stepped forward. "Remove it, or face penalties." Mom's breathing grew labored. She fumbled in her purse for her asthma inhaler. That's when Eleanor crossed the ultimate line. She marched over, snatched it away, and said coldly, "This kind of behavior is precisely the problem." The room fell silent in shock. Mom tried to reach for it, but Eleanor kept it just out of reach. "Return it when you learn some manners." Mom turned paler and paler as I jumped up, shouting for Eleanor to give it back. 2 of Eleanor's friends, board members who always voted her way, stepped forward, blocking me. She needs that to breathe. She needs to respect authority. Eleanor's icy voice cut through the chaos as she casually slipped Mom's puffer into a designer handbag. Meeting adjourned. Some people rushed forward, concern on their faces. Others turned away, choosing instead to pretend they hadn't noticed a thing. Mom's knees gave way. I darted forward, pushing past Eleanor's friends to break her fall. Somebody called 911. I screamed as Mom's lips began turning blue. "Your mother suffered a severe asthma attack." Dr. Patel's voice was calm but firm as we sat in the hospital consultation room. If you hadn't gotten her here quickly, I can't even finish that thought. The image kept replaying in my mind, Mom struggling for air while Eleanor walked away with a puffer. Can I see her? I asked quietly. Dr. Patel nodded. She's stabilized, but we're keeping her overnight. She's asking for her phone. I found Mom looking remarkably alert in her hospital bed, connected to monitors and oxygen. Her first words made my stomach knot. Did you bring my secured phone, the one in the locked drawer of my nightstand? Mom, you need rest. I'm going to call the police about Eleanor. No police. Not yet. Mom's voice was firm. Get me my phone first. I drove home in a heavy rain. The drops pounded against the windshield, matching the thunder of my heartbeat. When I arrived, a certified letter from the HOA was taped to our door, a clear violation of their own delivery guidelines. Inside, it demanded a $500 fine for disruptive conduct at a community event and threatened legal action if we didn't pay within 7 days. It was signed by Eleanor and stamped with the HOA seal. Unbelievable. I whispered, tossing it aside. In Mom's room, I found the key, exactly where she said, tape inside her copy of Pride and Prejudice. The drawer it opened revealed a phone I hadn't noticed before, along with a small notebook filled with financial records and codes. When I rushed back to the hospital, Mom was sitting up, looking much more serious, much more in control. Lock the door. I did. Mom, what's happening? We need to report Eleanor. Sit down, honey. Her voice was calm, more authoritative than I'd ever heard it before. There's something I need to tell you. She turned on the phone, entered a long passcode, and placed a call. Agent Catherine Reynolds, authorization code Lenine Delta 47. I need to speak with Director Swanson. Yes, it's urgent. I stared in disbelief at my kindergarten teacher mother, a side of her I hadn't even suspected, now a federal agent. Sir, my cover may be compromised. Her voice was crisp, professional. The subject's escalating to physical endangerment. Yes, she took my puffer, which contains a tracking device. No, my identity's still secure, but we need to accelerate the timeline. When she hung up, Mom turned to me. I'm not just a retired kindergarten teacher. I've been with the FBI for 35 years, Financial Crimes Division. I let out a nervous laugh. Very funny, Mom. You taught Mrs. Peterson's kids in half the town. That's true, but that was my cover for the last 10 years. She slipped a chain with a badge from underneath her hospital gown. That's real. I whispered, touching the metal. Eleanor Hoffman had been running a massive money laundering operation through the HOA for years. That's why we moved here after your father passed. Dad knew. Yes. Your father was my handler until he retired 5 years ago. We weren't supposed to fall in love, but we did. He stayed involved to keep me safe until his heart attack. I felt the room spin. Everything I thought I knew about our family had just been turned upside down. The asthma I suffer from is real. Mom paused. But the puffer Eleanor stole contains a specialized recording device that's been collecting her meetings and phone calls when I'm nearby. Eleanor made a critical mess-up by taking federal property. A soft knock at the hospital room interrupted us. Mom quickly slipped her badge back under her hospital gown and nodded for me to answer. 2 people in business attire stood in the doorway, a tall black woman and a younger man with glasses. Agents Clark and Rodriguez. The woman quietly held up her badge. We need to speak with Agent Reynolds. They entered and closed the door. Catherine, we've been monitoring the situation. Agent Clark's expression was solemn. Director Swanson has authorized immediate action based on the medical threat. Eleanor had scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting for tomorrow morning to deal with our supposed violations. That's when we move. I said she sent a notice before taking Mom's inhaler. The 2 agents exchanged glances. Perfect timing. Mom nodded quietly. The quarterly HOA fees were collected last week. If Eleanor sticks to her pattern, the funds will move tomorrow, after the meeting. That's when we make our move. Agent Rodriguez's expression was calm. but firm. Your hospitalization actually strengthens our case, adding assault to the financial crimes. What do you need me to do? I asked quietly, still wrestling with the reality that my kindergarten teacher mother was a federal agent. Mom reached for my hand. Go home, act normal, attend a meeting, record everything. We'll have a team nearby, but we need you to be our eyes and ears. Won't Eleanor be suspicious if you're not there? Mom's smile was piercing. Don't worry, I'll be there. Dr. Patel is actually Agent Patel. I'll be discharged in the morning. I drove home in a state of shock, nearly missing the black SUVs discreetly parked along the streets in our neighborhood. Walking up the path, I noticed our garden gnome, Raymond, glowering under the porch light. Was he, too, a player in this elaborate cover story? Inside, I fell into the couch and began looking through photo albums with new eyes, Dad's government accounting career, Mom's many teaching positions, then numerous conferences in different cities. Then I noticed something I hadn't before in a family photo from a beach, Dad's watch, the very same unusual model I'd noticed on Agent Rodriguez's wrist. How long had I been surrounded by federal agents? Just after midnight, a text arrived from an unknown number. Operation active at 0900. Be ready. I turned back toward the window, looking out over our quiet suburban street. I wondered what would happen when Eleanor Hoffman discovered she hadn't just stolen an inhaler from a vulnerable woman, but federal property from a veteran agent who'd been building a case against her for months. My pulse pounded in my ears as Mom gripped my arm outside the community center. Listen carefully, she whispered. I need you to act surprised when I reveal who I am. This operation is bigger than Eleanor's petty power trip. Inside, every seat was filled. Neighbors whispered and exchanged nervous glances. Eleanor sat at the center table, flanked by her loyal board members, Stuart and Diana, with Mom's inhaler displayed before her like a trophy. Late as usual. Eleanor smirked, tapping her diamond-studded watch. That's fine. We can now call this emergency meeting to address the Reynolds' ongoing violations and disruptive behavior. Mom slowly rose from her seat, hunched and frail, playing up her weakness. I bit my lip, honestly amazed by her ability to perform. For nearly 8 months, I'd watched her struggle with the stairs and carry an oxygen tank on especially difficult days, all a carefully maintained disguise. Eleanor pressed forward. Before we begin, I want everyone to see the documentation of the Reynolds' 17 violations this year alone. Photos were projected, our mailbox, Mom's rose bushes, even our Halloween decorations. As you can see, these people have no respect for our community standards, and just yesterday, Miss Reynolds disrupted my speech by feigning a medical episode. The room fell into uneasy silence. Even Eleanor's supporters exchanged nervous glances. You stole my medication. Mom's voice was weak, a dramatic contrast to the confidence I knew was underneath. That could have been a matter of life or death. That's ridiculous. Eleanor held up the puffer. I confiscated a disruptive prop. If you were truly sick, you would have gone to a hospital instead of putting on a show. That's precisely what I did. Mom's voice suddenly grew strong. She stood up straight and pulled out her badge, holding it high in the air. And now I'm placing you under investigation, Eleanor Hoffman. The room fell into chaos. 2 federal agents entered from the back, their dark suits a dramatic contrast against the crowd's disbelief. That's Agent Catherine Reynolds. The taller agent addressed the crowd quietly. She's been leading our financial crimes investigation across 3 counties. That's absurd. She's a teacher, a nobody. Eleanor's disbelief turned to panic. That's a lie. Mom kept her grip steady. That puffer you proudly displayed contained a recording device. We captured every word, including your confession about using HOA funds to pay for your vacation home in Aspen. That's illegal. You can't record me without my knowledge. Not when it's a federal investigation into money laundering. Mom's voice was calm, piercing. The bank records show over $200,000 redirected to your accounts. We have falsified financial reports, and now we have you on record deliberately endangering a federal agent by withholding life-saving medication. Eleanor lunged forward, but the nearest agent was faster. That's federal property. Stuart and Diana began to back away, but Mom raised her voice. Don't bother. Your signatures are on the fraudulent documents, too. Tasha, our neighbor, stood up, shaking. They fined me $2,000 while my husband was deployed just because our grass grew a little too long, while I was at my mother's funeral. This opened the floodgates. Neighbors called out additional complaints. Excessive fines, arbitrary penalties, selective enforcement. Quiet, quiet. Eleanor screamed, slamming her fist on the table. The community would fall apart without my leadership. These people are trying to destroy everything we've built. Mom opened her laptop and projected financial record for everyone to see. Residents of Pinecrest Gardens, these are your HOA financial statements for the past 3 years. The highlighted entries show money funneling to shell companies owned by Ms. Hoffman and her associates. Eleanor jumped up, knocking over her seat. You'll regret this. My husband plays golf with Senator Wilson. Senator Wilson's office is well aware of our investigation. Mom's calm delivery fell upon a shocked crowd. In fact, we received numerous complaints from homeowners about predatory practices by this board. As federal agents led Eleanor, Stuart, and Diana away in handcuffs, neighbors surrounded us, offering their thanks and their stories. Mom held up her hand for silence. There's something else you should know. She paused, reluctantly. Pinecrest Gardens was just one target. We've uncovered similar schemes in 12 communities across the state. Eleanor's group was using homeowners associations as shell corporations for money laundering. The full story will be in tomorrow's paper. Walking home in the fading light, I turned to Mom. Why didn't you tell me? She tightened her grip on my hand. Because your genuine reactions kept me from putting the operation at risk, and I needed to keep you safe. I paused. The asthma, that's real, isn't it? Mom nodded quietly. Yes, I've had it since I was a kid. I just exaggerated the symptoms for the assignment. The Bureau thought it made me the perfect undercover agent, someone nobody would suspect. Who would believe someone battling for every breath could be a federal agent? As we reached our doorway, Mom's phone rang. Her expression toned. Grave. We need to go back. They found something in the community center basement. Flashlights cut through the darkness as we rushed back toward the building. Yellow crime scene tape already marked the entrance. Mom held up her badge to the officer guarding the tape, and he let us through. What did they find? I whispered as we descended the narrow stairs. I never knew it existed. Documents. Mom said quietly. Lots of them. The basement was musty and dim, its metal shelving filled with forgotten holiday decorations and broken pool furniture, but the team's focus was on a section of wall that had been slid aside, unveiling a hidden room. Catherine, good timing. A man in a rumpled suit waved us over. Your hunch was correct. This goes way beyond local corruption. Inside, stacks of files reached toward the ceiling. Computer equipment hummed quietly in a corner, alongside what appeared to be a professional printing setup. Identity theft. Mom asked as she tugged on a pair of latex gloves. That, and much more. The man handed her a folder. We found evidence tying Eleanor's group to at least 3 criminal organizations that operate across state lines. They've been using HOA fees to launder money, but they've also been creating fake identities with the help of your neighbor's information. My stomach dropped. You mean they've been stealing our identities? Our neighbors' identities? Not just stealing them. Another agent called from his terminal. They've been selling complete packages, names, credit histories, backgrounds, high-caliber identities that can pass most security checks. Mom opened the folder and fell silent for a moment. Inside were perfect replicas of passports, driver's licenses, and social security cards, all with photos of people I recognized from our neighborhood, but with different names. That's why Eleanor was so obsessed with taking photos at community events. I turned toward Mom. She wasn't just gathering violation evidence. She was collecting IDs. Mom nodded quietly. And that's why she hated your garden gnome. Your camera might have captured her accessing this basement in the middle of the night. I blinked in disbelief. Wait, you knew about my gnome camera. Who do you think suggested the brand? Mom said with a wink. I needed extra surveillance without blowing my cover. Across the room, an agent called. We've got digital files. Transactions going back nearly 3 years. Mom turned back toward the computer, her expression growing grim. This is bigger than we thought. The payments trail crosses through companies in at least 7 countries. That's why the FBI got involved. I asked quietly, this isn't just a homeowners association scandal. Mom nodded. We received tips about unusual financial patterns. Small HOAs suddenly purchasing sophisticated surveillance equipment. Landscapers being paid well above market rate. Classic money laundering signals. We just hadn't expected an identity theft operation, too. Outside, more vehicles arrived. Residents gathered in disbelief as box after box of evidence was removed. Tasha slipped up beside me. Is it true Eleanor was stealing our information? Before I could answer, a commotion broke out near a police cruiser. Eleanor, somehow free from her handcuffs, tried to dart away. 2 officers quickly recaptured her, but not before she turned and locked eyes with me. You'll regret this, she hissed. They'll come for all of you when they discover their operations being compromised. Mom stepped forward. Who will come? Eleanor? Give us names, and we can protect you. Eleanor let out a chilling laugh. You think I'm the mastermind? I'm just a local manager. There are 50 communities just like this. As they secured Eleanor in the police car, Mom drew me aside. We need to talk about your safety. This case has grown much bigger. Back home, while Mom made phone calls, I tried to process everything. Our quiet neighborhood had been a front for international crime. My mother was a federal agent, and somewhere very powerful people were angry that their operation had been disrupted. Pack a bag, just the essentials, for a few days. We're leaving. What about our house? Our neighbors? Protection teams are already being assigned every home. She paused, reluctantly. But you and I need to go somewhere we're not vulnerable, somewhere we can stay safe. I rushed to collect photo albums, my laptop, and a few essentials. Where are we going? Witness protection, temporarily. She handed me a new phone. This is a secure phone. Your old phone stays here. A knock at the door made us both freeze. Mom drew a gun I hadn't even known she owned and peered through the peephole. She exhaled. It's Agent Michaels. The tall agent from earlier entered quietly. We need to move. We've intercepted communications. They know who you are, Catherine. Minutes later, we were in an unmarked car, speeding away from the only neighborhood I'd known for the past year. Streetlights glimmered against the windshield. Mom pressed my hand. I'm sorry I had to lie to you. This assignment was supposed to be simple. Gather evidence of financial crimes. Build a case against local corruption. Will we ever come back? I whispered, reluctantly looking back at our fading home. Yes. Mom tightened her grip. But first, we need to dismantle their entire network. 6 months later, we stood in our driveway once again. The house was exactly as we'd left it, although the garden had grown wild, and new security cameras kept vigilant watch. The trial had made national headlines. Eleanor and her associates received lengthy sentences, but their bosses remained elusive, and their network was disrupted but not destroyed. The neighbors warmly welcomed us back with a block party. The new HOA board, led by Tasha, enforced just one simple rule. Be kind. What will you do now? Tasha asked Mom as we enjoyed burgers in the park where everything had started. Actually, retire. Mom smiled, patting her real inhaler. My asthma's not pretend, and chasing criminals is a young agent's game. I turned to watch her chat with neighbors, people who now saw her as a heroine instead of someone weak or vulnerable, and I realized the greatest lesson I'd learned from her: never judge someone by appearances. As for the garden gnome with its hidden camera, we gave it a place of honor by our front door, a small but powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest protection comes from the most ordinary things.